Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
My name is Tracy, and I am an alcoholic. And I am nervous as all heck right now, so please excuse the jitters. They're not because of alcohol, because I have been sober since August the 4th, 2011. It is with great privilege I stand before you today. Thank you. This will be a learning experience for me as well, speaking in public about something that I am not experienced with as far as sobriety is concerned, because my sobriety date has only been a year and a half. So please indulge me as I try to get through this right here. I guess the first thing I want to say is that we as alcoholics, when we gather together in fellowship, can speak about our previous experiences with alcohol with humor. We can look back on it, and because of our fellowship, we can relate to one another and laugh about it. I want to say that as a disclaimer because there are probably some people in here that have friends or family or relatives that are not alcoholics, and I'm not laughing about or saying stories laughing at the expense of their pain. So with that disclaimer, I'd like to continue. I guess probably the best way to start is describe my background a little bit. I come from a very strict family. I moved 13 times before I went to college. My parents discovered a book called The Coming Revolution, Parent Revolution. And for those of you that are in your 40s or 50s, your parents might have discovered this book. It is a book about structure. And I was raised with structure. I was raised with rules 1 through 18 on the refrigerator, that if I didn't iron my clothes by 7:30 on Friday, the P equals penalty, was no phone for a week. If I did not clean the bathroom to the specifications of my mother, who was a clean freak, she would clean the house before the maid came in, then penalty would equal no outside for a week. One of the funniest punishments that my parents gave to my sister and I, who was 3 years younger, was when we would argue, 8 o'clock at night, keeping the household up, we would have to run around the house, no matter the weather. And at that time, we were living in Indiana. In January, this is a memory that I have not lost yet, with our snow boots on, shouting the lap 1, lap 2, around this big English Tudor house in a sloping landscape. All the neighbors would actually go outside with their coffee and their cigarettes and watch my sister run around the house. And my parents thought that would be a way for us to laugh, and that would be the end of the argument. Well, it worked. But that was basically, the beginning of my, that was my structure of my life. My first drink was at age 16. I worked at Howard Johnson's as a waitress in Boston, Massachusetts, or right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And I filled in for a cocktail waitress. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, you could serve liquor at the age of 18. Now, I was 16, so since I wasn't making the drinks, I could serve the liquor. I had a crush on the bartender. Excuse me. His name was Scott Reed. Cute guy. And I would have Diet Cokes as I was serving these, people in the lounge in a Howard Johnson's. And I noticed it tasted a little funny. Yes, I really did not know it was alcohol until about the third drink. It was flat, right? The soda was flat or whatever. But I knew it was alcohol by the third drink, and I kind of liked it. I was 16 years old. I was serving cocktails. I was making good money. And I drove home that night. And I was bouncing off the walls. My parents promptly took me into their car and took me to the county jail, where I was put in a cell and was told about the terrible and horrific ramifications of drunk driving. Well, my parents wanted to basically go over there and fire the manager because, I didn't know I was drinking alcohol. And, of course, then I ended up not working there anymore, and that was that. At the age of 17, I was in the Soviet Union on an exchange program, second tryst with alcohol. Soviet Union back in the 80s, vodka capital of the world. Hello. I was at home and didn't even know it. Drank again, of course, like I did when I was 16. Drank to the equivalency of finding myself in a hotel room with the Czechoslovakian Olympic water polo players in a hotel dancing to Grease. So, that wasn't a good experience either. My parents heard about that later, and I was lucky to see the daylight, before my graduation. Fast forward graduation, go to college. The very first night that I was in college, and by the way, I chose the college that was as far away from where my family was as possible. And got drunk the very first day in a fraternity house. Imagine that. And that began my illustrious career as a 1.7 GPA gal at Purdue University. And remember, back then, we're talking early 80s, it cost $11,000 for my parents to pay for that 1.7 GPA. Shoulda, woulda known, right? Well, that summer I came home, and my parents, with my younger sister, who's 3 years younger than I, went to a counseling session because Tracy's an alcoholic at 19. And I had that counselor manipulated to the point where he thought my parents were crazy because they're so strict. And isn't it normal for a kid in college to drink? And okay, so what? A 1.7 GPA? It's okay. All is cool. Well, I actually did maintain a little bit, not sobriety, but at least a little bit of functionalism until my mid-20s. And I say I'm still in college at this time. I kind of told my parents I graduated and let them throw me a party, and I hadn't graduated. I was very much in love and dating a man who was an alcoholic as well, and he ended up wrapping himself around a tree because of alcohol. I think that is a time when I started drinking heavily. As we all know with Bill's story, alcoholism is progressive, and it is a beautiful thing when younger people come into this program before they hit that bottom. I did not. Like a lot of us, I did have to hit bottom. The death of a man that asked me to marry him, and I said no because he was an alcoholic, really threw me into the spiral. I was driving around in my car with a gin and tonic at all times. So I finally did graduate, by the way. My parents never experienced that graduation party because I graduated earlier. And I moved to Florida and started teaching school in Miami-Dade County. God, I'm so lucky. The men that I've met in my life, ex-boyfriends, ex-fiancés, and there have been a few of them, are really fantastic men. But this particular man is the one that led me to Alcoholics Anonymous the first time, but not traditionally as we here know it. He was a DEA agent. And I was teaching school and dating him, and I was bartending. Oh, imagine that, an alcoholic bartending. Bartending on weekends, holidays, and during the summer. In fact, I made more money bartending than I did teaching. That was the first of my DUI experience. First time I got thrown in jail, and I was out within 2 hours because I knew somebody who knew somebody. Second time I got thrown in, I was taken out quite quickly because of my boyfriend. Third time I got thrown in, I got off on a technicality. This is all in 1 year at the age of 28 years old. But that was okay because everybody else I hung out with drank, partied, had a good time. They had babysitters watch their kids and go out. I thought that this was the norm. Well, it wasn't the norm, was it, as we know now? I found out after a blackout with this gentleman that he was going to ask me to marry him the next weekend at a wedding. But I did not remember the ugliness and the meanness of the things that I said and did to him. And he never really even told me what I said and did. It was just pretty bad, obviously, because he didn't ask me to marry him. And we were broken up. My stuff was outside of his house because we were living together at that time. And, of course, I didn't have a whole heck of a lot in savings. What did I do with all that money? Drank it away, of course. And I was on my own again. That's when the blackouts started happening when I drank. From the age of 28 until the day I stopped drinking, almost 20 years later, I was a blackout, ugly, mean, awful drunk. The only people that know me now are people that know me as a drunk, except for those of you that I've met in this fellowship. The fact that these people, my friends and my family, still associate with me is amazing. I always fell down when I drank. I had bruises from head to toe. I had my boss at one time told me that he thought that I was being beaten up by my husband. And for those of you that know Michael, know that that is almost an impossibility. I actually fell down and hit my head on the sink at my house and walked into the walk-in clinic the next day because of a gash that was huge and it needed stitches. And I walked in laughing, thinking, 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila, 4. Ha, 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 ha. And everybody was laughing about it. Got it stapled, and that was it. There's still blood in my grout, by the way, from that, and I refuse to clean it up, as a reminder. I finally decided to quit drinking on August the 3rd, 2011. My husband had had enough of me. Remember, he only knew me as a drunk. I've been with this man for 16, 17 years now, and he only has known me as a drunk. I don't know how he put up with me, but he did. And he decided that he needed a time out. Asked me where he went for his time out. His ex-wife's house. That's where he spent the next 6 weeks, or maybe it was 2 months. On that day that he left, And he was sobbing more than I was. He didn't want to leave me. It wasn't because of love as much as it was for fright and fear of what was going to happen to me. I experienced a detox that, of course, as an egotistical alcoholic that I am, bar none, nobody has experienced this kind of detox before. For 2 weeks, I was shivering, and I did this at home alone. Stupid. Nobody do that. I was at home alone, and I was shivering, throwing up, vomiting, all that. You guys know what detox is about. I don't need to remind you about that. But I did that at home on my own. And he would check in on me on weekends, make sure I had my cigarettes, and make sure I was safe. 3 weeks later, I walked into my first AA meeting. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I lived near campus, USF campus. And I was on the internet looking for meetings that were close to me. Now, it's been 3 weeks since my last drink. And I found out that there was a meeting on campus. It gave me the address. And I found this place. Now, campus is a little confusing. You know, buildings, blah, 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 roads, yeah. Finally found that. And there was a note on that wall saying that it had been moved to another location, which was 2 miles on the way other side of the campus. Now, I'm on foot here. And it's August, and it's hot. And I trek my way on over to that side of campus and find where this meeting is at. And it's at a church on Church Row off of 50th Street in USF, by the way, USF 164. Please come. And it's a blur. I've had to solicit the help of the people that were there to remind me of this. So please forgive me if I'm wrong on my memory of this. But I walked in, and I believe there were 7 people there. There was a woman, and then there were 6 men. I was sweating, obviously, and I was a mess. I'd had an hour and 45 minutes to contemplate, why am I going to get to this AA meeting? I got there, and they had finished the meeting and were about ready to say the Lord's Prayer. And I walked in, and every single person in that group sat down and had another meeting for me. That was my miracle. Since that day, I have not wanted to have another drink again. I have romanticized it about it when I see wine commercials on the Travel Channel. I have maybe thought about it while I'm floating around in my pool. But I have never, ever had the need or the desire to pick up a drink since that day at the USF 164 group. That is my miracle group. When people say they've been struck sober, I was struck stupid, because that was the first day that I learned how to feel, learned how to reason, learned how to be cognitively aware of my surroundings and make decisions. And I still don't remember that meeting. I don't know what I said, but I was told I was pretty pitiful. I was also 35 pounds thinner. Thank God for sobriety. Acceptance. But anyway, that is my story. Quitting drinking was easy for me once I got there. It took me 28 years as an alcoholic and as someone who knew that she was going to die with a drink in her hand. I was going to own a pub, and I was going to be the one sitting at the seat next to the cash register. I could not imagine my life without alcohol. Something happened that day. And it wasn't before the AA meeting. It was at that meeting that changed my life. I am so grateful for the people that were at that meeting. I would love to say the names of those people because quite a few of them are here, but I don't want to embarrass them. But one thing that I do know, quitting drinking wasn't difficult for me. Life is not difficult for me anymore either. It's challenging, but it's not the way it's supposed to be. That miracle group gave me a new grasp on my life. And when I have a really good day, and we all have them every now and then, I'm talking about one of those knockout, drag-out, fantastic, awesome days. Not only when everything goes perfect and as planned, but when you feel it in your heart, you know there's a universal reason why you are here. I have those days every now and then. And I am flabbergasted with the power that God has given me with this new awakening of the spiritual journey that AA has brought to me. It's a little embarrassing for me to say that because it sounds so preachy. But when you have a day like that, you know what I'm talking about. And I wish all of you one day like that this week where you just feel so in the realm of the universal good that God has meant for you. And we all know that it would not have been possible without this fellowship, our friends and our family, and the compassion that we all have for one another. And I guess that's it, guys. Thank you very much.
Awesome job. Only thing, what a wonderful story. But, I remember when I was in treatment and just starting out in this with days of sobriety. I remember watching people pick up 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. And looking at them saying, that's impossible. How did you do it? Never, ever discount the time that you have. If you have a day, you're a miracle. Speaking of miracles, the next gentleman that's going to speak is near and dear to my heart. The 164 group blossomed out of a trailer over on 12th Avenue with 3 friends and their sponsees. And not always see each other every week. They're not always here, but they're always in my heart. And this is one of those gentlemen, and it was his trailer. And for that, I always have gratitude. And if there's a spiritual being in this world who's human, this guy's his embodiment. Sometimes what comes out of a mouth doesn't always fit the appearance. And when I hear him speak, I hear God coming forward. And with that, Eric.
It is. I was sitting in the back and enjoying every bit of this day. My name is Eric, and I am a recovered alcoholic. And I say that because my sponsor told me to, and it's told to me out of this book to announce myself as a recovered alcoholic, having worked the steps in order and had a spiritual awakening. I don't do that to differentiate myself from anybody in this room. I do it just to say that I've worked the steps. Today I'm here to talk about step 11. It's one of the steps that early on I didn't work very diligently. And in the research that I've done for this, because I don't speak on this step at this workshop, I've always done step 12. So they took me out of my comfort zone. And speaking on this one, I actually did some research on this one. The old-timers didn't work it diligently in the beginning either. And I read some stuff that Bill Wilson wrote. And in his 24th year, when he started writing on emotional sobriety, and when he actually started working this step diligently and started noticing some changes in his own sobriety. So, with that, I'm going to come out of the big book and not lean on my own understanding for a few minutes. Step 11 on page 85. If you want to follow along, it says, Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. What is prayer and meditation? Prayer is talking to God, and meditation is listening to. For so long in my non-recovered years, I did a lot of foxhole prayers. God, get me out of this, and I'll do this. God, just get me out of jail this time, and I'll do this. God, just don't let me die this time, and I'll do this. And in those last days on Skipper Road, out on that railroad track, I was praying, God, just let this train hit me and end all of this. But after working the steps, I didn't want that anymore. But I was still pulling God out of my pocket. He was still that small. Remember, I had just turned my will and my life over to this care of this God of my understanding at that time. And at this point in my recovery, I'm learning that God grows. My understanding of God grows. And today, God is beyond my understanding. I know that might be hard to understand, but I believe today that this big, wonderful God no longer fits in my pocket, no longer fits in this room. I struggled earlier this year with my religious views of God, my AA view of God, and He brought me through that sober. I'm not going to delve into that. I'm going to delve into what I do in prayer and meditation. But what brought me through that was prayer and meditation. What do I do on a daily basis? It says that when I retire at night, I constructively review my day. Where was I resentful? Where was I dishonest or afraid? Where was I selfish? Doesn't this sound like another step that I just did? I'm starting to take some inventory of my day. Do I owe somebody an apology? Do I owe an amends? Is there something that I've kept to myself in this inventory that I'm taking that I need to discuss with somebody? My sponsor sometimes asks, hey, are you working your 11th step? I haven't gotten a call or an email from you. You're not discussing things with me. Of course, I have several friends that I keep in contact in here, and I discuss my 11th step with them. But is there something about what's going on with me in this inventory that I need to discuss with somebody else? Some discovery that's come up in my inventory. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could I have done better? But we must be careful not to drift into worry don't pull out the bat and start beating ourselves up. It's not going to help. Because it's easy to do that. I mean, even at almost 9 years sober, I'll get into that inventory, and it's like, man, I shouldn't be doing these stupid things at almost 9 years sober. What good is that going to do? The book tells me it's progress, not perfection. The thing is that this inventory gives me something that I can work towards. It gives me a diagram. And it also gives me an outline of actually how far I've come. When I first came into the program, I didn't care who I hurt. Today I try to live my life not trying to hurt others. It's a want, and I actually feel remorse. That God consciousness and my own conscience is, my first sponsor called it a conscience volume. In the third step, it was turned up. And when I do step on others' toes, instantly I start to have a feeling. For me, it's guilt and shame that I've hurt somebody. Or I start to know that I've done something wrong. Well, in this inventory at night, I start to know, hey, you know what, I spoke to that, I work at the Veterans Hospital. I spoke to that veteran in a way that maybe I shouldn't have. Or I had an attitude with my boss today. When I go into work tomorrow, I need to make an amends to that person. And if I don't feel like doing that, I need to ask myself if I really think I'm an alcoholic. What do I do in the morning? What I do is I go find a place where I can get quiet, because I have kids that are getting ready for school, for about 15, 20 minutes. I quiet what's going on in my head, because I have all these, Dan talked about limos. I have CEOs in my head telling me, oh, it's time to work out, it's time to get on the computer, it's time to get ready for work. And I practice some deep breathing, and I quiet those voices in my head, and I start to think about the day ahead. And I lay out a plan before my higher power, and I say, is this okay? And I wait. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can employ our mental facilities with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. In thinking about our day, we may be faced with indecisions. We may not be able to determine which course of action for that day is going to be the right one. Here's where that saying, take it easy, comes about. Not about the steps. Take it easy comes from relax. About this thought process about I have this thing that I want to do, but it's not coming clear whether I should do this. Relax and take it easy. The answer will come if you really take a look at what God wants you to do. Easy does it, right? We are often surprised how the right answers will come. Early on, I paid for this in a lot of interesting ways. I used to say, all right, God, I'm going to give you my work, and I'm going to give you this thing, but I'm going to take care of my laundry, and I'm going to take care of my car, and I'm going to take. And I learned that I needed to turn a lot of things over to God and let Him have it all. One of the big things for me was that I didn't want to turn my health over. I suffer from chronic migraine, and I suffer from a couple of other things that I acquired while I was in the military. And I carried around a lot of resentment because of it. And I owed a couple of doctors amends when I really looked at it. And I went back and made those, and I'm much more comfortable about it. But it was because I was taking my will back in those areas of my life. And it wasn't working too well. What do I do when I become restless, irritable, and discontented? Prayer should be done throughout the day. Like I said, I used to pray just when I was in trouble. Now I pray almost constantly. I can delve back into self many times each day, and when this happens, I go, God, your will be done, not mine. I have to remember that I'm God's being, and I need to carry His will into my life and in all areas. When I start getting restless, irritable, and discontented, I know that I'm sitting in self. I take a look at what's going on with me, say that prayer, and I'm usually on much better footing. Again, if I've stepped on toes while I'm restless, irritable, and discontent, I make that amends immediately. I don't let those things sit anymore. If I let those things sit, then just like it said in the fourth step, then I step on the toes of others, they retaliate, I build resentments, and eventually it's going to become a much bigger problem. By doing the 11th step, we become much more efficient. When we're not sitting there worried about yesterday and tomorrow, and we're sitting in today, it keeps us. God's plan and God's want for us is to be right here, right now. If we're sitting in tomorrow and we're sitting in yesterday, we might miss the spiritual experience that's happening right here, right now. God's in this moment. And through prayer and meditation, I get to stay in this moment right here. My grand sponsor, who died 2 years ago, talked about prayer and meditation. And the first time I called him, I was struggling. And he had the problem that I was struggling with. And he asked me, he said, Eric, have you been meditating? And I said, I meditate a little bit. And he goes, call me back in a year when you practice meditation. I thought it was rough. But I did. I sat down and I started doing it as outlined in this book. And my life started to change, and I started to struggle with that, started to struggle less with that area of my life. And at that point, he became willing to help me, instruct me in that area of my life on things that he had experience in. I looked up, and I'm going to end with just a couple of things out of Bill Wilson's writings from the Grapevine. And you can find these in Language of the Heart. It's one of my favorite pastime books. But I found, like I said, it's where I found out that they were that he struggled too with the 11th step. Not struggled with it, but struggled with practicing it on a daily basis. The chances are better than even that we shall locate our trouble in our misunderstanding or neglect of AA's step 11, prayer and meditation and the guidance of God. The other steps can keep most of us sober and somehow functioning, but step 11 can keep us growing if we try hard and work at it continually. If we expand even 5% of the time spent on step 11 that we habitually and rightly lavish on step 12, the results will be wonderfully far-reaching. So if we spend just a little bit more time in step 11, he says that we'll grow. As we go along with this process of prayer, we begin to add up the results. If we persist, we will almost surely find more serenity, more tolerance, less fear, and less anger. We will acquire a quiet courage, the kind that does not strain us. We can look at so-called failure and success for what they really are. Problems and calamity will begin to mean instruction instead of destruction. We will feel freer and saner. The idea that we may have been hypnotizing ourselves by autosuggestion will become laughable. Our sense of purpose and direction will increase. Our tensions and anxiety will commence to fade. Our physical health will likely improve. Wonderful and unaccountable things will start to happen. Twisted relationships within our families and on the outside will unaccountably improve. So I even found promises there. Guys, this has been a wonderful thing. I want to thank you for the privilege of speaking before you. Thank you so much, and y'all have a great day.
Okay, I'm not Toby, but I am an alcoholic. And our next speaker is going to cover step 12. And then Toby will be back in to do the closing and the chips and everything. And with that, step 12. Will, L.
Step 12. I'm Will. I'm alcoholic. My sobriety date is July 13, 2010. I have a sponsor and I sponsor others. Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. It's a two-part right there, okay? Having had the spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, try to carry this message, so it's working with others. The second half is living this, practicing these principles in all of our affairs. This book is set up in a way to, from the very beginning, in the forward to the second edition, XVI, at the very bottom it says, this seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another alcoholic as no non-alcoholic could. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent sobriety. Okay? This is in the forward to the second edition. This is in the very beginning of the book. So it kind of, to me, it indicates that there's a pretty important thing to do. And forward to the third edition, in spite of the great increase in size and span of this fellowship, at its core it remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. That is the essence of the 12th step. It's taking the time to show somebody else what was shown to you. And in my opinion, and I stress my opinion, it is I'm not going to say it's the most important step. I will say, in my opinion, it's the most fulfilling step. Because you get to see the light and come on in somebody else's eyes. You get to see the hope grow as they stay sober and they start to regain and rebuild their life. There's an entire chapter devoted to working with others. On page 88, this next chapter is devoted entirely to step 12. There's a whole chapter devoted to working with others. So again, this tells me this is imperative, extremely important. Forgive me for kind of jumping around a little bit, but this first paragraph right here, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is the 12th suggestion. And Abram kind of hit on it. This is, I don't read this as a suggestion. I read this, if I want to survive in AA, this is what I do. And this is what my sponsor told me that I would be doing. When he took me through the steps out of this book, he set it up and laid it out as a template for me to follow when I worked with somebody else, when I took them through the steps. And that has been the most fulfilling part of the program for me. You know, those 9-step promises, they come true in spades. You know, Kitty was talking, or no. Who did 9-step? Ruthie, that's right, yes. You did a fantastic job. I loved it. I always love hearing what you have to say. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. I learned that one. Because I was very ill when I came in. You know, I was so delusional when I first came in. I couldn't differentiate the true from the false. And my sponsor was the person that I bounced everything off of so that I could decipher what was correct and what was false. Because I was so broken when I came in that I didn't know any better. And it's been a fulfilling process to help other guys with that same thing. You know, to help them see the difference between their will and God's will, where they're putting influence of their own will on lives. And life will take on new meaning, to watch others recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. That is absolutely 100% correct for me. You know, the fellowship is such an important part of my life. It is a good majority of my life. It is the most beautiful thing that I have today, you know, is my sobriety. And it's all because somebody took the time to 12-step me. When I was in treatment, I met a guy on my second day that gave me hope, that gave me the idea that there was a better way to live. And he showed me how to do it by the way that he lived, which is the essence of the second part of this 12-step, which is live by these principles. And it's a continual work in progress for me. You know, I have days where I'm like super spiritual, and you know, and there's other days where I really have to stop because my first reaction is to not live by principle. And that's where, you know, when you live in 10, 11, and 12 and practice these principles in all your affairs, that's where the continual growth happens. You know, because if you live by these principles and you don't stray from them, you won't ever have to pick up another white chip again. You know, that's what this book tells me, is that if I live this way of life day in and day out, not when it's fun, when it's easy, when it's shiny, when it's a rough day, you know, live by these principles day in and day out is the essence of practicing these principles in all your affairs. And this includes all avenues of life. You know, for me personally, like when I was going through my 9-step and making my list, I too had a large list of financial institutions that I owed money to. And my sponsor kind of had corrected me because I had the idea of when to do so would injure them or others. Well, I was others, and that would injure me having to pay them. And he told me, I'll paraphrase it, but he very nicely told me that was not the case, that if I wanted to survive, that was what I would have to do. And I haven't fully completed all of that yet, but I'm continually to work towards it. You know, I'm paying off things little by little. And every day, it's like a new opportunity for growth. And that's what this program teaches us. You know, and the way that we show the newcomer how it's done is by living it ourselves. And when I live this program, when it's tough, you know, other people see that, you know, and because like early on in recovery for me, I struggled with an illness that kind of plagued every avenue of my life. And for a long time, I did the poor me. And it took me a long time and a lot of work and processing to kind of see that it may have had nothing to do with me. It may have been for somebody else. And it may have been just so that they could see what I was going through and to see that that they too could go through it without having to pick up a drink. And that was the way that I was able to process some tough situations. And when other people see that we're living this program and that we're experiencing those 9-step promises, it truly is a program of attraction rather than promotion. When it's do as I do, then you've got a place of ground to stand on. Because I remember early on when I was kind of coming around and I thought I had everything in the bag and I knew everything, I would watch other people and I would always see that their actions didn't match their words. And I always was, early on, like I worked with my sponsor about it, but I kind of had judgment issues, you know? And it was, I was judging people. Why do they get away with not having to do the work that I have to do so that I don't drink? And I was always very jealous. And my sponsor kind of pulled me aside, and he kind of helped me with some things and to see that everything comes full circle. You know, this isn't, you know, where it talks about half measures avail us nothing. When I half-step this program, I get nothing back. And I kind of started to see that come to fruition with other people, because there was a while back, like a couple friends went out, one died, and those were some guys that I was jealous of. And my sponsor kind of came to me and he said, "Do you see? Like that's half measures. What do you have to be jealous of?" And I was like, okay. You know, that was pretty powerful for me. And that's when I truly started putting in even more work. Because I didn't get sober to just be content, to be semi-happy. I got sober because of the 9-step promises that my sponsor talked to me about. And it's been an amazing ride. And that's why I put in the work that I put in. And that's why I work with others. Because that, like it talks about, that's the bright spot of our lives. And it's been an amazing process. And I had all this other stuff to do. You know, and at the very end on page 103, it says, "After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were but a symbol. Besides, we've stopped fighting anybody and everything we have to." You know, and that's what this program is. You know, it's very, very simple. It's not complicated. I make things complicated. And when I keep things simple and I stick to the basics and I live this program rather than implement the ideas that I think it should be and stay out of as much self-will as possible and continually stay humble enough to listen and take suggestions, I get to stay here, you know, and I get to continue to work with others as I was worked with. And that's this program. You know, and that's why it's so powerful, because you get to see people recreate their lives. You get to see people have the families back. And you get to see this program grow and flourish. You get to see it become something that from hopeless to hopeful. You know? And that's what keeps me on fire, because there's days when I'm not totally jazzed about recovery, and it's a have to, it's not a get to. And that's where, you know, it's imperative for me to continually work with other people, because that 12-step work right there, that ensures that I'll stay here. That ensures that I don't suffer again from untreated alcoholism, as the book talks about. You know, that is where the miracle happens, because you get to see that guy pick up his white chip, pick up his 30 days, pick up his 6 months, pick up his year. You know, you get to see him grow. And I got to have a hand in that. You know, if I step out of the way and let God flow through me, the miracle happens. When I can stay out of the way long enough to let the miracle happen, that is the beauty of this program. So, Toby, thank you for asking me to come up and share about the 12-step of my experience with it. So with that, I'll close. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.